Imagine it's 2024. You're Linda, 63 years old, a public school teacher in Springfield, Illinois. You've been grading papers, managing classrooms, and attending faculty meetings for 34 years. You make $68,000 a year. Your knees hurt. Your patience for administrative bureaucracy ran out sometime around 2016. But you've stayed. You stayed because of the promise. The promise was simple. It was written into your employment contract the day you started in 1990. Work for the state for 30 years. Contribute a portion of every paycheck. And when you retire, you'll receive 75% of your final salary, adjusted for inflation, for the rest of your life. The state of Illinois made that promise. And for 34 years, you held up your end. Now it's time for them to hold up theirs. Except here's what Linda doesn't know. The pension fund that's supposed to pay her doesn't have nearly enough money. Not even close. The state of Illinois owes its pension systems over $140 billion more than it has. That gap isn't shrinking, it's growing. Every year. And there's no plan to fix it because there is no plan that can fix it. Not anymore. Linda isn't worried. She reads the statements. They tell her the money is there. Her union tells her the benefits are protected by the state constitution. Her HR department tells her to fill out the retirement paperwork. Everyone is acting like everything is fine. That's the first sign that it isn't. This isn't a story about one teacher in one state. This is a story about a $50 trillion promise made across the United States. A promise that cannot be kept, and a system designed in a way that guaranteed it would fail. This isn't theory, it's documented history, it's actuarial science. And it's already happening. Once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. Here's what most people think is happening with pensions. They think it's a political debate. Republicans want to cut benefits, Democrats want to protect them. The media covers it like every other partisan fight. There are protests, negotiations, and legislative sessions that go nowhere. Sometimes a city declares bankruptcy and pensioners take a haircut. It makes the news for a week, then disappears. Most people assume the issue is limited to a few poorly managed places. Detroit, Puerto Rico, maybe Illinois. They think the federal government will step in if it gets bad enough. They think Social Security is separate from this. They think their own 401k is fine because it's invested in the market. They don't think about the firefighters in their city, the teachers in their schools, or the police officers on their streets, all of whom are owed benefits from the same system. The public narrative is that pensions are a manageable problem being addressed by reasonable people making difficult choices. That narrative is wrong. What is actually happening is far simpler and far worse. The pension systems in the United States have made promises that exceed their assets by roughly $5 to $8 trillion, depending on how you count. These are not abstract projections. These are legal obligations. Money owed to real people who have already worked the years, already paid into the system, and are already counting on checks that will arrive every month for the next 20, 30, or 40 years. The gap is not closing. Every year it widens. Because the math doesn't work. The math never worked. And at this point, the math cannot be made to work without either breaking promises or breaking budgets. Usually both. This isn't a political failure. It's an actuarial inevitability dressed in political clothing. Let that sink in. To understand how we got here, you have to understand what a pension actually is and how the system was designed. A pension is a defined benefit retirement plan. That means when you retire, you receive a fixed amount every month for the rest of your life. That amount is calculated based on your years of service and your final salary. It doesn't depend on stock market performance. It doesn't depend on whether the fund's investments did well or poorly. The benefit is guaranteed. That's the promise. On the other side of that promise is a fund. The pension fund collects contributions from employees and employers during the working years. It invests that money, and it pays it out during the retirement years. If everything goes according to plan, the contributions plus the investment returns equal the future payouts. That's the theory. The problem is that according to plan requires 3 assumptions to hold true. First, the fund must receive the contributions it was promised. Second, the investments must return what was projected. Third, the retirees must not live longer than expected. All 3 assumptions have broken, simultaneously, for decades. Start with contributions. Every year, actuaries calculate how much money must go into the fund to keep it on track. This is called the annual required contribution. In theory, states and cities are supposed to pay it. In practice, they don't. Not fully, not consistently. Illinois, New Jersey, Kentucky, Connecticut, and many others have underfunded their pension contributions for 20, 30, 40 years straight. Why? Because pensions don't vote. Schools do, roads do, police do. Every year there's a budget crisis, and every year the pension payment is the easiest thing to cut. It's invisible. The bill doesn't come due for decades, so politicians pay for today's priorities with tomorrow's obligations. That's the first fracture. Now consider the investment assumptions. Pension funds typically assume they'll earn 7 or 7.5% annually over the long run. That assumption was set decades ago when interest rates were higher and stock market returns were more robust. Today, 10-year Treasury yields hover around 4%. Fixed income returns are lower across the board. To hit 7%, pension funds have poured money into riskier assets, private equity, hedge funds, infrastructure. These investments are less liquid, harder to value, and carry hidden risks. And even with that risk, many funds still don't hit their targets. When a fund assumes 7% and earns 5%, that 2% gap compounds every year for decades. That's the second fracture. And then there's longevity. When many of these pension plans were designed in the 1950s and 60s, life expectancy after retirement was 12 to 15 years. Today, it's over 20. People are living longer, drawing benefits longer, and the funds were never built for that. Think about what this means. The fund is receiving less money than promised. The money it has is growing slower than expected. And the money it owes is being paid out for longer than anticipated. This is not mismanagement. This is structural. The design itself, guaranteed failure. To understand the hidden mechanism, you need to follow the incentive structure. Politicians operate on short-term cycles. Elections happen every 2 or 4 years. A governor who cuts public services today loses today's votes. A governor who underfunds a pension today won't face consequences for decades. So the incentive is clear. Underfund now. Promise to fix it later. Let the next governor deal with it. Union leaders operate on membership approval. Their job is to protect and expand benefits for current members. They have no incentive to reduce future obligations. They have every incentive to demand more. And because collective bargaining often happens with politicians who also want union votes, the negotiation produces generous benefit promises that neither side has to pay for immediately. Actuaries calculate the liability, but actuaries are hired by the funds themselves. A conservative estimate showing a massive shortfall creates political problems. A generous estimate using optimistic return assumptions makes everyone look better. So the assumptions drift, just slightly. Year after year, 7.5% becomes the norm even when no one believes it's realistic. Accountants report the numbers, but public pension accounting is different from corporate accounting. Government Accounting Standards Board rules allow funds to report their funded status using their own expected return rate as the discount rate. Private companies must use market rates. This means the same liabilities would look far worse on a corporate balance sheet. Public funds use legal fictions to look healthier than they are. And taxpayers, the ones ultimately on the hook, have no seat at the table. They don't see the liability until it arrives as a property tax increase, a service cut, or a municipal bankruptcy. Everyone in the system has a rational reason to kick the can, so everyone kicks the can. The only constraint that can't be kicked is time, and time eventually runs out. This pattern is not new. History provides case studies. Start with Detroit. By 2013, Detroit's 2 pension funds were underfunded by approximately $3.5 billion. The city had been underfunding contributions for years. Industrial decline shrank the tax base. The number of retirees eventually exceeded the number of active workers contributing. When bankruptcy finally came, retirees took a 4.5% cut to their monthly benefits. It doesn't sound like much until you realize it was paired with the elimination of cost of living adjustments. Over a 20-year retirement, that compounds to a 30 to 40% reduction in real purchasing power. Think about what that means for a 70-year-old who planned their life around a promise. Then look at Pritchard, Alabama, a smaller city, but an important case. In 2009, Pritchard simply stopped sending pension checks. No bankruptcy filing, no negotiation, just cessation. Retirees who had served as police officers and firefighters received nothing. The city argued it had no money. Courts eventually intervened, but years passed. Some retirees died before any resolution. Then there's Puerto Rico. Its pension system was essentially pay-as-you-go, meaning current contributions were immediately sent to current retirees with almost no actual fund built up. When the island's economy collapsed and migration accelerated, there weren't enough workers left to fund the checks. Puerto Rico's pension crisis became intertwined with its broader debt crisis, and retirees became unsecured creditors in a bankruptcy-like process. They're still waiting. Across the Atlantic, Greece faced a parallel collapse. Public sector pensions were generous, retirement ages were low, and the tax base was insufficient. When the European debt crisis hit in 2010, Greek pensions were slashed by up to 40%. Retirees who had worked their entire careers for the state saw their income collapse overnight. Suicides among elderly Greeks spiked during the adjustment period. The social contract broke. These aren't outliers. These are what happens when the math catches up, and the math always catches up. Now let's examine who benefited from this design. Politicians benefited because they could promise generous benefits without raising taxes or cutting services during their terms. This made them popular with unions, with employees, and with voters who saw no immediate cost. Public sector unions benefited because they could negotiate contracts that looked like victories, higher benefits, earlier retirement ages, cost of living adjustments. Their members voted for them. Their political power grew. Wall Street benefited because pension funds became massive clients. Asset managers, hedge funds, and private equity firms collected billions in fees managing pension assets. Whether the funds hit their return targets or not, the fees were paid. The largest public pension funds in America pay over $1 billion a year in management fees. That money flows to financial intermediaries regardless of performance. Early retirees benefited because they received their full benefits before the system ran short. A teacher who retired in 1995 has likely collected more in benefits than they ever contributed, plus interest. They were first in line. Current employees in healthy states may still benefit. California's CalPERS, despite its problems, is backed by a state with a large tax base and political will to fund it. But even there, the strain is showing. The winners were those who made the promises, those who negotiated the promises, those who managed the money, and those who retired early enough to collect before the music stopped. Everyone else is in line behind them. Now let's examine who pays the price. First, future retirees. Linda in Illinois, the firefighter in New Jersey, the highway worker in Kentucky. These are people who did exactly what they were told. They worked the years, they paid their portion, they trusted the system, and they will retire into a fight over whether the system can pay them. Some will receive reduced benefits, some will lose cost of living adjustments, some may see their funds fail entirely. Second, current taxpayers. When pension obligations cannot be paid from the fund, they're paid from the general budget. That means higher taxes or reduced services. In Illinois, pension payments now consume roughly 27% of the state's general fund budget. That's money not spent on schools, roads, healthcare, or economic development. Cities raise property taxes to cover pension costs. This becomes a vicious cycle. Higher taxes push out residents. A smaller tax base must cover the same obligations. Taxes rise again. Third, municipal bond investors. When a city or state cannot meet its obligations, it faces downgrade, default, or restructuring. Bondholders take losses. This affects not just institutional investors, but also individuals who hold municipal bonds for tax-advantaged income. The risk embedded in these bonds is not priced correctly because the crisis has not fully arrived yet. Fourth, public employees themselves. In states where pension funds are failing, recruitment becomes harder. Who wants to work for a pension that might not exist? Younger workers opt for private sector jobs with 401k plans. This brain drain weakens public services. The remaining workers bear heavier burdens. The cycle reinforces itself. The people who pay the price are the ones who were never in the room when the promises were made. They inherit the debt, they inherit the constraint, and they have no way out. Now examine why this couldn't end any other way. The structure of defined benefit pensions contains a time delay trap. Benefits are promised today. Costs arrive tomorrow. There is no immediate feedback mechanism to correct overpromising. A company that overpromises pension benefits will see its stock price fall, its credit rating drop, and its board face consequences. A government that overpromises pension benefits will see nothing for 20 years. By then, the politicians who made the promise are long gone. The political economy makes reform nearly impossible. Public sector unions are among the most powerful political forces in state and local government. Any attempt to reduce benefits faces organized opposition. And unlike private debt, pension benefits are often protected by state constitutions. Illinois, for example, has explicit constitutional protection for pension benefits. Courts have struck down reform efforts. The legal architecture prevents the very changes that might save the system. The demographic curve makes resolution impossible through growth. The ratio of active workers to retirees is shrinking. In 1960, there were roughly 16 workers for every retiree in the Social Security system. Today, it's about 3. In many public pension systems, the ratio is worse. Some mature systems have more retirees drawing benefits than active workers contributing. Growth cannot save them. The math requires either more contributions than taxpayers can bear or returns higher than markets can provide. And the interest rate environment closed the final escape route. For years, pension funds assumed that falling interest rates would be offset by rising asset prices. But at the end of a 40-year bond bull market, with rates near zero and then rising rapidly, both bonds and stocks suffered. The 2022 market correction hit pension portfolios hard. And unlike individual investors who can wait out volatility, pension funds must pay benefits every month regardless of market conditions. Every avenue is closed. That's the trap. There's no path that doesn't involve someone taking a loss. The only question is who. This brings us to where we are now. Right now, state and local pension funds in the United States are underfunded by somewhere between $1.5 and $5 trillion, depending on the accounting assumptions used. The higher estimates use market-based discount rates. The lower estimates use the fund's own optimistic return assumptions. The truth is almost certainly closer to the higher figure. Right now, cities and states are raising taxes, cutting services, and redirecting budgets to meet pension obligations. Not because they want to, because they have no choice. The Illinois legislature has repeatedly tried to reform its pension system. Every attempt has been blocked by courts. The state is trapped. Right now, credit rating agencies are watching. Moody's, Fitch, and Standard & Poor's all include pension obligations in their assessments of municipal credit. Downgrades mean higher borrowing costs. Higher borrowing costs mean less money for operations. Less money for operations means either more taxes or more service cuts. Right now, some funds are reaching critical funded ratios. A funded ratio below 60% is generally considered a crisis level. Kentucky's teachers' retirement system has operated near this level. Chicago's Municipal Employees Fund has hovered in the danger zone. At these levels, funds are essentially hoping for market miracles. If markets underperform for even a few years, insolvency becomes possible. Right now, younger public employees are increasingly enrolled in defined contribution plans rather than defined benefit plans. This shifts the risk to them. It also means fewer workers contributing to the old defined benefit systems that still have to pay legacy obligations. The funds lose contributors while keeping their liabilities. The math worsens. And right now, Congress is considering various bailout proposals for multi-employer pension plans in the private sector. The Butch-Lewis Act and similar measures would inject federal funds into failing private union pension plans. This sets a precedent. If the federal government bails out private plans, public plans will demand the same. But federal finances are also constrained. The Congressional Budget Office projects deficits stretching as far as the eye can see. A federal pension bailout would add trillions more. The pressure is building from every direction, and no relief valve exists. Consider the endgame scenarios. Scenario 1, benefits are cut. Courts or constitutional amendments allow reductions in promised benefits. Retirees receive less than expected. This violates decades of legal precedent, but becomes politically necessary. It has happened in Detroit. It happened in Greece. It could happen in Illinois or New Jersey. Retirees bear the loss. Scenario 2, taxes are raised dramatically. States and cities attempt to fund the gap by increasing property taxes, income taxes, or fees. This works until it doesn't. Residents and businesses leave for lower tax jurisdictions. The tax base shrinks. The remaining taxpayers face an ever larger burden. This has already happened in Connecticut, where population has stagnated as pension costs have grown. Scenario 3, services collapse. Rather than raise taxes or cut benefits, cities simply stop providing services. Fewer police, fewer firefighters, longer waits for permits, worse schools. The quality of life deteriorates. This has happened in various fiscally stressed cities. It's invisible until it's obvious. Scenario 4. Inflation erodes the debt. This is the stealthiest option. If inflation runs high for a sustained period, fixed pension benefits lose purchasing power even without nominal cuts. A retiree receiving $3,000 a month still gets $3,000, but that $3,000 buys less every year. This is a hidden default, a haircut no one has to vote for. Scenario 5. Federal bailout. Congress intervenes with taxpayer funds from the general public. This socializes the losses across all Americans, not just those in affected states. It rewards states that underfunded and penalizes states that were fiscally responsible. It sets the precedent that pension obligations are nationally guaranteed. It costs trillions. None of these outcomes are painless. None are politically easy. None solve the problem. They only determine who absorbs the loss. At this point, there are only those 5 options, and all of them involve someone getting less than they were promised. Why does this matter now? Because the crisis doesn't announce itself. It arrives slowly, then suddenly. Detroit didn't collapse in 1 year. It decayed over decades. The bankruptcy was just the formal recognition of what had already happened. And the same is true for pensions broadly. The collapse is already happening. It's happening in budget fights. It's happening in unfilled positions. It's happening in delayed maintenance. It's happening in tax increases that don't improve services. The people retiring today are the first wave. The baby boomers, the largest generation, are now drawing benefits. Every day, 10,000 Americans turn 65. Many of them worked in the public sector. Many of them are owed pensions. The outflows are accelerating just as inflows slow, and the market has not cooperated. The assumption that endless returns would cover the gap was always a gamble. That gamble is now visibly losing. And unlike a casino, you can't walk away from the table. For Linda, in Illinois, this isn't abstract. She's retiring next spring. She's counting on that check. She didn't create this problem. She taught children for 3 decades. She voted. She paid taxes. She did everything right. And now she's about to discover that the promise she based her life on was never fully funded. She's not alone. There are approximately 26 million Americans receiving public pension benefits right now. Tens of millions more are expecting them. The obligations stretch out for decades, and the money isn't there. This is the crisis that doesn't look like a crisis. because the checks are still going out, because the website still shows a balance, because no one has officially declared failure yet. But systems don't fail when the last check bounces. They fail when the math becomes undeniable. And that moment is not in the future. It's in the actuarial tables. It's in the funded ratios. It's in the demographic projections. The pattern is already in motion. This is not a prediction. This is pattern recognition. Pension systems built on optimistic assumptions and political incentives to underfund have failed repeatedly throughout history. They failed in Detroit. They failed in Pritchard. They failed in Greece. They failed in Puerto Rico. The mechanism is always the same. Promises are made, contributions are deferred, returns disappoint, longevity extends, the gap widens. And eventually, someone doesn't get paid. The United States is not immune to math. It's not immune to demographics. It's not immune to the same structural incentives that caused failures elsewhere. The question isn't whether this system will face a reckoning. The question is, who will be made to pay when it does? Retirees, taxpayers, bondholders, all of the above? History suggests the answer is always the same. Those with the least political power bear the largest share of the loss. The teachers who retired quietly, the firefighters who didn't have lobbyists, the taxpayers who weren't paying attention. They're the ones left holding the bill. This is historical and educational analysis, not financial or investment advice. But understand this, the obligations are real, the shortfalls are real, the time is running out, and the system is not designed